Have you ever been on a job site and realized your drawings, notes, and measurements are scattered across 5 different places? And when the contractor asks you a question, you're scrambling, or worse, guessing. And that's when mistakes gets expensive. In this training, I'll show you my exact iPad setup for site visits, how I redline drawings, calculate areas, create 2 scale sketches in minutes, scan rooms with your iPad's Lidar, use AR to nail perspective drawings, and even live sketching on a 3D model right in front of your contractor. And after this, your site visit will run smoother, faster, and look way more streamlined. Let's get started. This workflow involves actually using the Lidar camera on the back of your iPad Pro. If you have an iPad Pro, there is a camera or a scanner on the back of it that allows you kind of 3D scan a room and to build a model that you can draw over. So that's what I'm going to do here. And if you don't have an iPad Pro, actually that's not really that important because I actually don't have an iPad Pro. I have an iPad Air, and that's because I have a iPhone Pro. So the iPhone Pro has the exact Lidar scanner on the back of it. So it's this little scanner. It's hard to see, but I will show you because you can use the same scanner on the iPhone. So if I go into the Morphola Trace, if you purchase Morphola Trace using the same iCloud, you're gonna have access to both from your phone and iPad, which is really convenient because let's say if you don't have your iPad with you, if you only have your phone with you at the time you visited someone's house, you can really just use the phone feature and do the LiDAR, the room scan just as well. So I want to show you where this is located, and I'll jump back to the iPad. So this is the room scan feature, and you will only see this available if you have the iPhone Pro, I believe iPhone Pro 12 and above. So anything earlier, you're not gonna have this feature. Or if you have an iPad Pro, that will automatically have this feature in it. So if you're not seeing this, it's probably just means your hardware isn't compatible enough for that to come up. So what I'm gonna do here is, if you're on the site, I would just use this on the phone, and I'll actually play you the video I recorded yesterday because I'm not able to walk around the room to show you how this is done. So I'll play this video and I'll walk you through some of the important things. So I'm actually currently in my own house. I'm working through some of the design and layout as we're accommodating our growing family of 4. So this is me just trying to scan the house with my phone. And keep in mind, all this is done actually in real time. So you can see how quickly that I'm able to do this room scan and build it with a LiDAR camera. So you can see I'm walking around the site. I'm really just aiming at the fenestration, the ceiling, the corners of the wall. You can see how quickly Morphola Trace can use the camera to detect these surfaces. And you can see that little bits of model, 3D model at the bottom of the phone, right? That's building it in real time. You also see all the furniture, the table inside the house, which, it captures. Unfortunately, unless you have a completely empty room, those things are going to show up, but they don't really matter because what you need at the end of the day is the space to be built out for you. So imagine if you are going on a client's house and you don't have time for extended measurements, you could easily use this feature to do a 5-minute scan. As you can see, this was literally less than a couple minutes, and this is in real time. So you can see the model being built in the iPhone, but what I need to do now is to actually share this to Morphola Trace via airdrop. So you can see I'm using my iPhone here, and I just airdropped it to my Morphola Trace on the iPad. And then you get the exact same model when it comes in. You can also pan it around, spin it around in the same way. And from there, this is what I'll show you next is I'm gonna bring back my iPad right now, is I'll show you this room scan in the model format. So this is the model itself. So if you haven't used this is such a cool feature. I think that's only available inside Morphola Trace. So what you'll see here is this is the model that I built. So this was built at a different time. Actually took longer to scan the the stairway and the kitchen island. So this took about 5 minutes or so, really. So you can do a couple of things in here. What you can do is obviously you can put it in a top view. So if you are drawing a floor plan, this would be your go-to view. You can also bring it to any of the side elevation. Sometimes things are a little hard to see, but they do have features where, let's say, let me bring it back to the orbit view. They do have a feature where you can play around with the sun setting. So if you are playing around with the altitude or latitude, or you can actually even set your model to the actual location where you are located. So imagine if you're bringing a model in here or you're scanning a model, you can actually type in the exact address, and this will actually bring up this Apple map. So put in the address and it will actually geolocate the model for you. So if you're doing some sort of a sun study, this could be a very kind of effective way to do a quick, dirty analysis. You can also see there's views for the camera control. So if you want to do a interior sketch, what I could do is first find myself in a place, and I'll actually maybe just zoom way out to increase my field of view so I see more of the interior space. And if you've been on my past presentations, I really stress on when you're taking a view or you're rendering, make sure your vertical lines are straight, right? So in here, they've got a feature called 2-point perspective, and it's this knob right here. So if you tap on that, that basically sets all your parallel lines or your vertical parallel lines straight so that you end up getting just 2 vanishing point at the most. So this is really helpful feature that I think they've added in here, which really, really awesome. So again, you can really find multiple views, orthogonal views. And what I'll show you here is in the few views that I've done, you can see you can do a quick sketching of the interior perspective. You could do an axometric, analysis if that's the goal, or you can really, for what I needed for was to create something quickly to actually, convince my wife of our new, floor planning in the living room. So I don't want you to judge me based on the floor planning and the design itself. There's reason why I've, let's say gotten rid of our couch in here because I don't think we use it often. So really, this is what I can show to my wife or a client of yours very quickly. So I would just, maybe as a tip is, after you do the scan, bring your tape measure with you just so you can take down some critical measurements like the length and the general width of the room so that it's in the general ballpark. And I wouldn't trust this with your life just to get it into the this is not a survey. This is not what the service called Canvas is using. That is a lot more accurate. This will get you in the ballpark. Maybe you're gonna be off, if this is 50 feet, maybe you're gonna be off by a couple of inches at the most. So this is what I'm finding right now. You're gonna be more or less in the 95 to 98% accuracy range, but there is a little bit of tolerance that I think personally is really acceptable, right? Because we're sketching here, we're diagramming, we're thinking about spaces. We're not in AutoCAD, right? So if I can live with a couple of inches in this whole length, that's totally fine. And I'll just quickly show you maybe the layer makeup, because I think that is also important when you're working digitally, is just to keep track of all the process. So when you save a floor plan view, it does save it out as a sort of a view with the shadow turned on. I know it doesn't make sense because it's kind of like a SketchUp model, but without the lines. So you can see here, this is the critical measurement phase that I was referring to. You need to find, where your windows are, where my kitchen island is, just to make sure I actually do have enough space to plan out some of the potential FF&E layout. And you can see in the last couple of layers, this is where I spend a little bit more time just trying to create a better graphic for someone else, like a client, to see. And everything is done in layers, as you can see here, so that there's always opportunities to go back and edit something if they're not drawn on the same layer. And this is part of why drawing on the iPad is so powerful, is you can have this flexibility of undo, redo, updating your drawings and renderings all on the fly without really rescanning anything from the computer to the scanner. This is what I'm what I feel like has improved my own personal workflow by 2 5 folds. And the best part about this, I think, is you might know this. There is a ruler that we call the super scale ruler. So the room that you scan actually, it's to scale, right? So when you zoom into an area, you can actually use this ruler and it will expand and it will contract based on the extent of your zoom. So you can be drawing to as close as, an inch. If you zooming even more, you can theoretically draw to like 116, 132 second of an inch. But I don't think that's serving the point of sketching. But if you are a cabinet maker, I would totally see getting to that level of precision is important. And I'll show you how to do that in a slightly different workflow where we'll bring in a gridded notepad. But for now, this is such an important feature that I feel like I need to show you this first. Okay, so there's definitely other ways to use that feature here, which I'm not going to demonstrate for now, just for the sake of time. The second workflow that I want to show you is the augmented reality, and that is this feature right here. And this one does not require your Lidar scanner. So you don't have to use the Lidar on the phone. Well, yeah, you don't have to have a Lidar. You just need to have the camera. So this is the camera-based feature where it will I'm actually gonna play you this other short recording because it's also necessary to explain this function. But just note that's where the menu is, and I'll show you this Lidar feature and I'll just voice over how to use this. So here, we're gonna use this AR perspective, and now I'm actually going to attempt to draw a perspective over this. So I'm using the built-in camera and the sensor to find the perspective in here. And after you do that, you can actually pivot your camera somewhere else to actually take the photo. You can even tweak the grid color so it's not so bright or dark. And you can see in here, I have the grid. You can set the grid to 1 meter, 2 meter, or you can do it in feet into the units that you actually want to use when you're drawing something a little bit more precise, maybe like a table or something. And then you take a picture of it, and this will bring it into Morpholo Trace. So this workflow doesn't require you to use your iPhone. And what I'll do right now is, you can see in here, the perspective is actually set up for you. So because I've taken a photo with my vertical lines not straight, I'm dealing with a 3-point perspective, right? But that's fine because we can rely on this perspective feature to really sketch over. So let me bring my camera back to my overhead, and we can see that in here. This is the drawing that I quickly did to also show my wife, because a lot of times clients have a hard time visualizing just the floor plan, right? They really need to see things in 3D. So this is a very rough sketch that I did with just the pencil brush. And you can see this is perspective control that is being turned on. And if I zoom out, you can see my vanishing point is set up for me. So I'm not sure why I can't see the third point, but you can see this is set up as a 3-point vanishing point. If you're manually setting something up, you could choose 1 point or 2 point. But when you take the photo using the AR feature, those vanishing points are set up for you. So the next thing you do is when you're drawing in perspective, you're literally drawing to those perspective lines, to those converging points. So for example, if I create a new layer and if I have this perspective tool turned on, you can quickly see that anytime drawing something, it is drawing to this vanishing point, right? Which is this cross right here. So this can be incredibly fun and just a relaxing thing to do. If you are not very comfortable drawing perspective from scratch, I want to show you just a couple of the layer makeup behind this as well, because I do think it's important just to show you from the photo that it was taken from the iPad. And this is actually before, this photo was taken before we cleaned it up. So you can see, we used to have the playpen and the couch in those areas. And if I turn on this perspective guide, you can see the vanishing points are pointing to this vanishing point. And then what I did here was I actually took a part of the floor plan and I overlaid it in perspective, because you can do that. You can put it into perspective over where the table and the new setup is. And from there, what I did was a very quick pen sketch over to bring things into 3D. And some of this required a little bit of eyeballing, just in terms of determining how tall something is, like the table and where we have the bookshelf. And then from there, I did a simple graphite drawing over that. You can see this drawing wasn't drawn in layers because I knew I just wanted to do something very quickly, and I wasn't very precise with putting things on different layer. This is an application that I can imagine being very useful on site. We're taking lots of site photo. If we can quickly take a photo, have it determine our perspectives, have that set up for us so that we can draw some very simple sketches over, that can be very effective for both the client and the contractor, right? Okay, so let's keep going with the third thing, which is actually, I want to show you probably the area that everyone here will use at some point, because we're all working with PDFs, right? Whether it's on the computer or it's on the iPad. So if you are taking your iPad on doing construction site visits like I do, having your PDF loaded ahead of time can be really important. So my iPad doesn't have the built-in cellular reception or the LTE function. So what I do is I use Dropbox, and the firm that I used to work for used Dropbox as well. So we will load our Dropbox folders and the files. So most of the time, if you're just offline loading the PDFs, that doesn't get very big, like material specs, floor plans, drawing sets. They're relatively small. So even if you have an iPad that doesn't have a huge storage, you can see right here. So in this Dropbox platform, I can access my files that I previously downloaded before I left the house. So all the PDFs in here can be loaded in Dropbox. You don't have to necessarily have to be imported into Morphola Trace, but this is where I would keep all the drawing files, just in case you need to access them when you don't have like internet, right? So nowadays, what I do is I will preload my PDFs in Morphola Trace, and I can just actually cycle through it one by one while I am on site with my iPad on the left hand, with my Apple Pencil on the right hand. Instead, what I used to do was carry a bunch of tools, my half size printouts, scale ruler, tape measure, red line, to document changes that I often will make mistakes. So nowadays, if you have the PDF brought in to scale, I'll show you how to do that. You can actually be making very precise measurements and annotations right on the iPad. And you can do that for different dates, different days. And the way I track dates and time is actually pretty primitive. So I just make the layers. I just put on my notes and notations on the layers that I visited for those days. So you can see that this layer has this date, and then the next layer has a different date. So this lets me keep track of like, when did I make those notes on these layers? There are other ways to do that. Like you could also make a copy of this PDF or page and track your notes that way. But this way has been, personally working for me pretty well. And when I do go back to the office, I will often take like a snippet, like a screenshot of an area, and this will go to accompany the memos that I'll write out at the end of each site visit. So that having that visual memo in addition to a written memo was very effective for me to do, because I used to have to write a very lengthy text to describe a condition. If that was accompanied by a drawing or a sketch, that could be very easily explained. And you can see here, let's see. This is a condition where we're being very precise down to the inches about where this planter box is. So if you have the scale ruler, if this page is calibrated, then you can really be drawing to scale and making these proposals in scale with your contractor. Now, On the elevation sheet, we also had some last minute changes about how to treat our front elevation. So we wanted to experiment by bringing some of these wooden slats a little bit lower. And instead of going to the computer, I created a new layer, just mocked it up on site very quickly, and we proceeded with these changes. And if you want to, you can also slap on a title block like this that you might have used for decades in the office. This one was actually customized from scratch by hand, but you can bring something like this in here outside of from the computer to really integrate this as a proper ASK that you can send to your team, your contractor, or a vendor. And then I'm going to show you a couple of interior elevations. So this is actually another good example where, mid construction, we had some unexpected changes to where the client wanted to move their appliances. So the appliances that used to be under counter, now they wanted to move it to the wall ovens as wall ovens. So without making changes to the overall massing, I was able to really sketch in the scenario where they had the wall oven next to the fridge, and instead of again drafting this out on the computer, I could do this very accurately to scale, to the inches. So these are down to the inches. So in my mind, they had more than enough accuracy to really get the job done. So we ended up just sending this sketch to the cabinet vendor, who was able to revise his shop drawing before he went into fabrication. So this saved us quite a bit of time just to be able to communicate the changes from the field to the vendor. And then in the last page of this, if you wanted to, let's say, if you were the contractor, if you were someone who is ordering the materials yourself, like the tiles, you could actually just do a very quick area takeoff. So if I wanted to, let's say, find out how many square footage this wall is, by doing a rectangle, this tells me that I have 65 square foot of tiles. And this is a pretty good estimate because we're always adding overages to this. So 10-15%. This is a very dirty thing, very quick and dirty thing that if you are the person who's ordering tile and you're solely relying on the PDFs or the drawing set, this is incredibly helpful because when you bring the PDF to scale, you can really reliably trust the data that this comes out. Now, speaking of bringing the PDF to scale, I think I want to just quickly show you what most people will get wrong when they bring in their PDF in for the first time, because I've made this mistake plenty of time, because it's also quite confusing, to be honest, in the menu, because when you open up this new project, you have a PDF icon, right? So most sensible people would bring in a PDF this way by actually clicking on this and bringing in a PDF. So let's say I'm going to bring in a PDF that I currently have, and it is a as-built floor plan. So in here, we've brought in our PDFs in here. Not a problem. The problem is these PDFs they're not to scale. So if I zoom in on here, if I pull in my scale ruler, you can see that if I put my scale to where the measurements are, this is not 29 feet, right? This is not to scale. And if you are a Bluebeam user, in Bluebeam, you can assign scale to the PDF very easily. So this is a big problem of bringing your PDF in if you need your drawings to be sized to scale. However, there is a much better way. It's not completely foolproof, but the better way to do this is to actually use the custom feature. And by bringing the PDF this way, so let's say we're bringing the same file, we'll go to bring our as-built floor plan this way. This actually will prompt you to select a scale to assign to the pages. So this is going to be very useful. Let's say if most or the bulk of your drawings are in quarter scale, right? So in this case, I know most of my floor plans and elevations are in that quarter scale. So in here, okay, so this is error. Sometimes it will error up. So let me try that again. So I'm going to bring this PDF using the custom and then I want to do the cloud drive. And that I've experienced that error before, but hopefully this time this will work. So you can see this time it's worked. And now you can see this set of PDF actually is a multi-page, right? You could, you could zoom in, you could zoom out, and you can flip through the PDF like this, if you wanted to. You can also export your PDF all at once as a single file instead of exporting them individually. So that's those controls are all here. Anything that you may want, they are probably already existing. So if I wanted to go to the page and verify if it's being loaded correctly to scale that I assigned, the 1/4 inch scale that I've assigned. So I'm gonna just bring it in to this kitchen right here, and you can see that from here, this end to this end, it's saying it's 23 1" right? So I'm gonna open up my scale now, and because I signed it the 1/4 inch scale before I brought in the PDF, this should correspond. So actually this needs to be here. So you can see that from here, let me just say from this end to this end, you can see on the ruler it's 23 feet. So when I bring PDF this way, I can assign a scale to the entire PDF set. That is also just a slightly bit problematic because, as you'll notice, is in the set of drawing, not everything is at the same scale. So for example, if your side plan is at 1/8 of an inch, which is a smaller scale, you're not going to be able to pull up your ruler and verify that this, from this end to this end, is going to correspond to the scale. So you can see that on paper, this is 100 feet, but in scale, this is 50 because we've scaled it differently. We didn't assign the right scale to this side plan. So a quick fix in scenarios like this is actually just to use the built-in scale calibration tool. So what we'll do here is, this is also very similar to Bluebeam. You can just bring in 2 ends of the drawing, right, like I have here. And then I'm gonna type in manually 100 feet just to make sure that I have calibrated this distance manually by hand. So if I click on my check mark in green, now you can see that the scale has been registered. So if I bring in my scale ruler, I can confidently measure one end to the other end as 100 feet. So this is just a tiny bit of work that you have to do to calibrate the pages that are kind of the outlier. And when you do this, this is only calibrating this individual page. Everything else still remains at the 1/4 inch scale, which is a scale that we brought in earlier. So this is just like a small hiccup that I think most people will miss when they're starting fresh with Morphola Trace. Now I have a couple more examples for you to think about. Another really good application to use Morphola Trace is using the scale to replace, your site clipboard. So a lot of times we'll bring a clipboard, maybe it's on a gridded paper, but that grid doesn't really respond to any scale. It's just whatever scale we assign to it, right? And as you can see here, this is a reusable letter size paper, and you can put in whatever scale that you want on this paper. So for this drawing was done at 3 inch to 1 foot. So if I set this up correctly, you can see that these solid treads, they're actually exactly 4 inches because that's how much we cut them down to, 4 inches. So you can also notice, it might be hard to see on screen, but there is actually a background grid like the one on the clipboard, except this background grid, you can set the unit of the grid to whatever you want. So I'm gonna make this a little bit more red so it's more obvious, but currently this grid is set to 1 inch apart. This can be 2 inches. If I do 2 inches, you'll see that this will grow. So this is really helpful. If you are drawing like a floor plan, you can set the grid to be 1 foot apart. If you're drawing a detail, you might set this to 1 inch apart, which you can show a little bit more detail. So even if you are freehanding, having this grid really allows you to have that precision to draw in the the waterproofing details very well. So if you have title blocks like a title block that you may want to put on a letter size template, you can easily do that. I'm just going to demonstrate this with you. I'm going to use the same custom grid custom function to bring in a title block in here, as this is part of the exercise files I provided for you. So this is called the letter size template. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring in this template, right? And the next thing, as you'll see, is it's going to, again, ask you, what scale do you want to assign to this letter size template? So for me, I know it's going to be, if I'm drawing a 3-inch detail, what I'll do is I'm going to do 3-inch to a foot. And then I'm going to bring this, basically this template in as a 3-inch to a scale template. And from here, what I would do is I would set the grid to be 1 inch apart. And then I'm going to pull out my ruler very quickly just to verify that each grid is indeed 1 inch apart. So if you are drawing, like a wall section, right, you're basically counting 1, 2, 3, 4, the number of like grids to really get a sense of how big something are. And this is approximation, right? So a drywall is 5/8, right? So that's going to be the drywall, and then your installation can be inside. But this can be incredibly useful if you are still using your traditional notepad to assign a scale to it. So if I'm at a place where, if let's say I'm finished with this detail, you can easily share this PDF with a contractor and be fully assured that because you've drawn it to scale, that the contractor is not going to misunderstand it, because they're going to have a scale when they measure whatever they print out from the drawing. So I'm going to show you very quickly. So on the export part of this, what I'll do here is you can see print size for this page is set to 8.5 by 11, and the print scale will pick 3-inch to a foot. So, and obviously you have to put in your company information and whatever other information, the client's house address, etc. in here. And now I can confidently export this to, let's say if you want to send it as a text, you can also save it to your Dropbox or cloud. So really the point is, right now, without having to go to your computer or scanner, you can export this PDF and send it to whoever who has the ability to print this out, and then they can really use a scale ruler to find out the measurements if that's important to them. So I think personally that can really replace your needs to sketch a detail on site. There are other scenarios where if you are doing sort of measurements in a client's house, you can also make the paper bigger, set a grid to 1 foot apart or 10 foot apart, and then you can start kind of like replacing your need to hand measure on a clipboard inside Morpholo Trace. That's entirely possible. I've done it. I've seen my students do it. That is also another good example to do that on site with your clients. So I think what I would love to show you in the last part of this is just a quick example of how you might want to bring in a 3D model. And this workflow is going to be very similar to the room scan, except right now we're going to be using the 3D model feature to bring in a 3D model that you may have exported from SketchUp, Revit, Rhino, Morpholo Trace. As long as you're feeding it the right format, you're gonna be able to bring in your computer model into a 3D
sort of virtual model, if you will, and you have the opportunity to sketch over this model right in front of your client's eyes or your contractor's eyes. So you can see this interface is actually very similar to the room scan feature, right? What we'll do here is we can easily find an angle or a view to save from, and then we can certainly use our location control. So let's say this is in Redwood City in California. So this would pinpoint where that is, and you can generally get a sense of what the sun control, where the location, even the time of the day, if you want the sun to be reflecting that time of day. So you can have the same ortho views, the top, the front, the back. And I think what I'll show you right now is to actually come out of this. I will go to the file that I've done quite a bit of drawing. So this is that same model. So this is the same model, except this model already has a number of drawings kind of living inside of this. So if you are, if you are someone who's going to presenting in a client's house or you're visiting a site, I'll show you a couple of use case scenarios. So one of them is definitely going to be more of a like a pretty rendering style. You're using it to illustrate for permit meetings. So this is a rendering that I did for the client's permit meeting. If you are using it to conceptualize a project early on, and some of these sketches are a little bit more looser, more evocative, and it needs to be quick, you can also use the built-in scale, built-in perspective finder to really draw in scale in these very hard, streamlined style. So you can see none of this, well, actually, there's a little bit of freehand in where the trees are, but you can see most of the building geometries inherit this sort of a hard line look. And then if you're getting into the inside of the house, you can really, find a view that you need to show. Maybe like it's the connection in the distance mountain, and it's the inside outside connection in this project that I think really made the project really, really well. And then lastly, if you are on construction site, this is actually the condition that we wanted to get built. So this is the scenario where, if you have the 3D model, but the model isn't quite capturing the exact on-site conditions. So for example, you can see the trellis that we modeled out are extending beyond what we wanted, and we actually want the beam to come out a little bit more on this side. So what you can do is just create a new layer. Again, the perspective is set up for you, so you're not freehanding in here except for the texture part. And then here I can accurately capture where I want the steel beam to end up in relation to the smaller trellis, and where I want my structural members to extend beyond this. So there's a level of sketch precision that you can communicate just using the layers themselves. So again, this might not be exactly what you think of when you're using Morpholo Trace for, but it is actually a very applicable scenario that I think potentially one day you can bring this into your work meetings and not be able to, take the fat pencil and then draw it on the freemium member. That's also pretty, but I think there is a case to be made for drawing the details out this way.
I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to take this even further, I've got some case study files on my website that you can download and open up on your own iPad and see the file structure, organization, logic, and more. So I'll leave that link in the description below this video.